He was one of more than 32,000, a veteran sworn to defend a country that now left him sleeping on its streets. On a freezing night, he gave his only blanket to a shivering child at a bus stop. When the boy's mother arrived, a billionaire CEO, what she offered him in return wasn't charity. It was a reckoning. His name was Marcus Thorne, a decorated Army sergeant with 2 tours behind him, now surviving on the streets of Chicago. He represented a brutal statistic. Black veterans are more than twice as likely to end up homeless. That single act of wrapping a blanket around a stranger's child would collide with a power he never saw coming. This is what happens when a system built to fail one man meets a woman with the resources and the rage to tear it all down. Marcus Thorne didn't fall through the cracks. The cracks were engineered. He enlisted after 9/11, driven by a sense of duty his father, a Vietnam veteran, understood but dreaded. He served 8 years as a combat engineer. His job was to build and to clear, building forward operating bases, clearing routes of IEDs. He was good at it. Received an Army Commendation Medal for his work in Afghanistan. He left the service in 2012 with an honorable discharge, a specialized skill set, and what he thought was a promise. The promise was that his country would have his back, just as he'd had its. The first fracture appeared at the Veterans Affairs Office. He filed for disability benefits for tinnitus and chronic back pain, common for engineers working around constant heavy machinery and controlled detonations. His claim entered a labyrinth. For 18 months it was processing, under review, awaiting examiner. This delay wasn't bureaucratic accident. A 2024 lawsuit filed by the Black Veterans Project would detail a decades-long pattern, the systematic denial and delay of benefits for Black service members. The economic loss to Black veterans and their families, the suit alleges, totals in the hundreds of billions since World War II. Marcus was a data point in that statistic. While he waited, he tried to work. His military experience was supposed to be an asset. Instead, it became a barrier. Employers saw combat engineer and made silent assumptions about PTSD, about rigidity, about a hair-trigger temper. Studies confirm this bias. Some employers wrongly assume veterans cannot adapt to civilian environments. For Marcus, a Black man with a military bearing, the bias was compounded. Interviews evaporated. "You seem like a great candidate," they'd say, never calling back. The second fracture was housing. His savings drained by the wait for benefits and unstable gig work, he applied for a housing voucher through a VA program. He was told the wait list was 3 years long. He found a room in a boarding house, paying week to week. Then his car, his last reliable asset, needed a repair he couldn't afford. He missed a week of work delivering food. He missed a rent payment. The lock was changed on a Tuesday morning. His belongings were in 2 Army duffel bags on the porch. The street is a different kind of service. Your mission is singular: survive, find food, find a place out of the wind, avoid conflict, protect your few possessions. The mental calculus is constant, exhausting. For veterans, this environment is catastrophically familiar. It mirrors the hypervigilance of a deployment, but without a unit, without a purpose, without an end date. The most consistent risk factors for veteran homelessness are substance abuse and mental health problems. For many, the street comes first, and the coping mechanisms follow. Marcus avoided the shelters. Too much noise, too many triggers, the feeling of being trapped. He preferred the controlled exposure of the city. He had his routines. A bench in Grant Park before dawn, the public library during the day for warmth, and to use a computer to check the VA portal, still pending. The loading dock behind a restaurant on Wabash where a cook would sometimes hand him a sandwich after closing. And the bus stop on Michigan Avenue. It was well lit, covered, and the night buses provided a rhythm. He'd sit there for hours, a ghost in plain sight, watching the sleek black town cars glide past the glittering storefronts. The woman in one of those cars was Alana Pierce. To the business press, she was the visionary founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics, a billion-dollar logistics and data analytics firm. She was 42, a figure of sleek power and calculated disruption. Her story was legend, daughter of a single mother who worked as a hospital administrator, scholarship to Stanford, meteoric rise. She was the kind of billionaire who gave TED Talks on ethical scalability. But the narrative missed a key chapter. Her brother, Liam, had been a Marine. He'd come home from Iraq with a quiet distance in his eyes, and after 3 difficult years, he'd taken his own life. The VA had failed him. The system had failed him. Alana had buried her brother, and then she had buried her rage, transmuting it into a relentless, cold drive. She built Apex not just to succeed, but to amass the kind of power that could, one day, break systems that broke people like Liam. She was driving home from a late board dinner, scrolling through a funding proposal for a veteran employment nonprofit on her tablet, when her driver, Henry, slowed the car. "Everything all right, Henry?" she asked without looking up. "Just a minute, ma'am, my grandson." Henry's voice was tight. Alana looked up. They were at the Michigan Avenue bus stop. Under the glow of the street lamp, she saw Henry's 6-year-old grandson, Caleb, huddled on the bench, shivering visibly in his thin jacket. He was supposed to be with his mother at her shift work. A miscommunication, a missed connection, a small human error with cold consequences. And she saw the man. He was seated at the far end of the bench, a silhouette of worn green canvas and stillness. As she watched, he moved. It wasn't a startle, not a rush. It was a deliberate, weary unfolding. He stood, shrugging off the heavy, frayed army blanket draped around his own shoulders. In 2 steps, he was beside the boy. He didn't speak. He simply knelt, a stiff, practiced movement, and wrapped the blanket snugly around Caleb's small frame, tucking the ends in with a careful, almost military precision. The boy looked up, eyes wide. The man offered a single, small nod. Then he returned to his end of the bench, sitting back down in his fatigues and jacket, now exposed to the biting Chicago wind. Alana Pierce was out of the car before Henry could react. The cold hit her like a wall. She rushed to Caleb, gathering him up, the rough wool of the stranger's blanket against her cheek. "Baby, are you okay? Where's your mom?" As Henry hurried over, flustered and apologetic, Alana's gaze locked onto the man on the bench. He was looking straight ahead as if the act had never happened. He was in his late 40s, his face etched with a fatigue that went beyond one cold night. On the collar of his jacket, a small, tarnished pin caught the light, a veteran's insignia. The pieces connected in her mind with a violent, electric clarity. The pin, the blanket, the silent, unhesitating sacrifice. This wasn't just a homeless man. This was a veteran. A veteran was freezing on a bench because he had just given his only protection to her driver's grandson. The systemic failure she had raged against for years was no longer an abstract policy failure. It was a man, shivering on a bench 50 feet from her. Her brother's face flashed in her mind. This was not a moment for charity. Charity was a tax write-off, a passive donation. This was something else entirely. This was a target. She handed Caleb to Henry. "Get him warm in the car, call his mother." Her voice was low, absolute. Then Alana Pierce turned and walked toward the bench. The man didn't look at her. Up close, she could see the gray in his short-cropped beard, the 1,000-yard stare fixed on the traffic lights. "Sergeant," she said, the word not a question but an identification. His eyes flicked toward her, assessing, guarded, a soldier's look. "That was my driver's grandson," she said, gesturing to the car. "You gave him your blanket." Marcus Thorne finally turned his head. His voice was a rasp, worn down by cold and disuse. The boy was cold. 4 words, no sentiment, no expectation of thanks. Alana crouched down, bringing herself to eye level, ignoring the cold seeping through the knees of her tailored wool slacks. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "Marcus, my name is Alana. I need you to listen to me very carefully." She paused, ensuring his full attention was on her. "I am not offering you a handout. I am not offering you a bed in a shelter for the night. I am making you an offer of employment, a job, a real one with a salary, benefits, and a path forward. but it comes with one non-negotiable condition. Marcus's expression remained impassive, but a faint, skeptical light entered his eyes. He'd heard offers before. They usually ended at a soup kitchen. Alana's next words were measured, deliberate, and carried the full weight of her billion-dollar authority. You have to tell me everything. Every single step that led you from that uniform to this bench. Every form they lost, every door that was closed, every promise that was broken. You have to tell me the whole, true story. She leaned in, her breath misting in the space between them. And then, together, we are going to burn their entire system to the ground. Marcus Thorne studied her face, looking for the lie. He'd been pitched hope before by outreach volunteers with clipboards, but this woman's eyes held no pity. They held a cold, focused fury he recognized. It was the same look he'd seen in his platoon sergeant's eyes before they rolled into a contested village. It was the look of someone who had identified a target. "Burn it down," he repeated, the words a dry whisper in the cold air. A faint, grim smile touched his lips. It was the first sane thing he'd heard in years. He gave a single, slow nod. "All right." Alana Pierce didn't take him to a shelter. She didn't take him to a soup kitchen. Her driver, Henry, opened the door to the town car, his expression a complex mix of profound gratitude and professional discipline. Marcus hesitated at the curb, his duffel bags in hand, a man caught between two worlds. Then he slid into the deep leather seat, the warmth of the car so shocking it felt like a physical blow. They drove to a discreet boutique hotel near the river. Alana had called ahead. A suite was ready, no front desk check-in required. A security detail, two men with quiet efficiency, took his bags. "Get warm, get some sleep," Alana instructed him at the door. "There are clothes in the closet. Order anything you need from the kitchen. We start at 8 a.m. my office." She handed him a business card, just her name and a number in sleek, embossed text. Then she was gone, the scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway, a ghost of another universe. Marcus stood in the center of the silent suite. Plush carpet, a view of the river lights, a bathroom larger than his last rented room. He didn't touch the minibar. He didn't order food. He walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under the scalding water until his skin was raw and red, washing away the grime of the streets, watching it swirl down the drain. He slept for 14 hours straight, a deep, dreamless void of exhaustion. At 7:55 the next morning, he stood outside the soaring glass headquarters of Apex Dynamics. He wore the new clothes from the closet, a simple, well-fitting button-down and chinos. He felt exposed, a ghost wearing a costume. The security guard at the monolithic desk scanned a list, nodded, and directed him to a private elevator that ascended silently to the top floor. Alana's office was not an opulent cave. It was a command center. One entire wall was a seamless data visualization screen, maps and graphs flowing in silent streams. The other was floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the city. She stood at a central table, not a desk, where 3 other people waited. "Marcus, this is my team," Alana said, no pleasantries. "David Chen, our general counsel, Eleanor Vance, head of investigative analytics, and Michael Ross, former JAG Corps, now our specialist in military and veterans law." Marcus shook their hands, meeting each person's assessing gaze. These weren't social workers. They were operators. Alana gestured to a chair. "Start from the beginning, the day you left the service." And so he did. For 3 hours, Marcus talked. He talked about his discharge, the transition class that felt like a cartoon, the first VA appointment. He described the disability claim forms, a mountain of paperwork where a single missed checkbox could mean a 6-month delay. He named the private contractors who did the initial claim reviews, companies whose profit margins depended on denying or delaying approvals. Eleanor Vance typed notes on a translucent tablet, her fingers flying. David Chen asked precise, clarifying questions about dates and form numbers. Michael Ross listened with a clenched jaw, interjecting with explanations of the relevant statutes, his voice tight with a professional rage. Marcus told them about the employment desert. He recited the names of the staffing agencies that offered warehouse jobs at minimum wage, no benefits, ignoring his engineering experience. He described the interview where the manager had said, "We need team players, not lone wolves," while starring at Marcus's military service record. Then he got to the housing voucher, the HUD VASH program. "They told me the wait list was 3 years," Marcus said, his voice flat. "I asked what I was supposed to do for 3 years. The counselor just shrugged, said the program was overwhelmed. A success story, she called it, because they'd housed so many already." Michael Ross finally broke, slapping the table. "It's a triage system. They manage the optics of the annual point-in-time count while leaving thousands in the queue. It's designed to create the appearance of progress, not to deliver a solution." Alana had been silent, packing slowly behind them, watching the data wall. Now she spoke. "Alina, cross-reference. Marcus's service timeline, his MOS, military occupational specialty, with the VA's own data on high-demand skill transfer. Pull the approval rate statistics for disability claims in his regional office, segmented by race of the applicant. I want to see the contract performance metrics for the third-party administrator that handled his file." Alina's fingers danced. Within minutes, graphs bloomed on the screen. A line chart showed the national average wait time for disability claims, 125 days. A dot pulsed over Chicago, 280 days. Another chart broke down approval rates. The overall rate was 72%. For Black veterans in that region, it was 58%. "There's your disparity," David Chen said quietly. "That's not a disparity," Alana corrected, her voice icy. "That's a pattern, a discriminatory outcome. Now show me the money." Alina brought up a new dataset. The billion-dollar federal contracts awarded to the claims processing company, Perdition Health Solutions. Their stock price, steadily climbing. A sidebar of news articles. Perdition announces record profits. VA extends contract despite auditor concerns. "The system isn't broken," Alana said, staring at the corporate headquarters photo of Perdition. "It's functioning perfectly. It's a wealth transfer machine. Taxpayer money goes to the contractors. Denied claims save the VA budget. The human cost is externalized onto the streets. Marcus isn't a failure of the system. He is its intended product." The room was silent. Marcus felt a strange, hollow sensation. He had always internalized the failure. To hear it framed as a cold, deliberate calculus was somehow more terrible and more liberating. Alana turned to him. "You gave me the what. Now I need the who, names. The specific claims adjuster who sat on your file, the supervisor at the employment agency, the housing counselor, every person who was a gear in this machine." Marcus hesitated. They were just doing their jobs. "Exactly," Alana fired back. "And their jobs are the problem. I'm not asking for vengeance, Marcus. I'm asking for a schematic. To break a machine, you need to know which gears to remove." So he gave them names. Janet from the VA benefits office, who always sounded tired. Carl at the temp agency. Ms. Alvarez at the housing authority. Alina fed each name into her system, building profiles, mapping connections. "Here's the first pivot," Alina announced, her eyes scanning a new data cascade. "Perdition Health Solutions. Their regional VP for contract compliance is a man named Arthur Branch." She pulled up his LinkedIn, a smiling, silver-haired man. "He sits on the board of the Illinois Veterans Business Association, a charitable organization according to its filings." David Chen leaned forward. "Let me guess. The IVBA has received generous grants from the Perdition Foundation," Alina finished. "And who chairs the grant committee at the Perdition Foundation? Arthur Branch's wife." "A closed loop," Michael Ross muttered. "Fund a charity that creates good PR, sit on its board to oversee the spending, ensure the charity never actually critiques the parent company. It's a washing machine for reputation." Alana's smile was thin and dangerous. "Good, That's a pressure point, but we need more. Marcus, you said the final fracture was your car. What happened? Marcus explained the transmission failure, the $800 repair estimate, the payday loan place that offered him $300 at 200% interest. The mechanic, a guy named Leo at a garage on Western Avenue, who'd taken one look at his VA ID card and said he could maybe do it for $500 under the table, but he needed cash up front. Leo, Alana repeated. Elena, find him, dig. I want to know if he's done this for other vets. The investigation unfolded with terrifying speed. This was no longer about one man's story. It was a forensic audit of a systemic collapse. Apex's analysts, used to optimizing global supply chains, now turned their tools on the veteran support pipeline. They found the choke points, the profit centers, the policy flaws written by corporate lobbyists. A week later, Alana called Marcus back to the command center. The data wall was a mosaic of damning evidence. Leo the mechanic, Alana began, has a side business. He offers discounts to veterans with pending VA claims, taking a portion of their eventual back pay as collateral. He's filed liens on 3 disabled veterans' benefits. He's not a savior. He's a predator, feeding at the very end of the chain. Marcus felt a surge of nausea. He thought Leo was doing him a favor. Second, Alana continued, the employment agency. We had an analyst apply with a fabricated resume, identical to yours but with a different name and no military history. They offered her an interview for a logistics coordinator position at $45,000 a year. The position you were told didn't exist. The bias is quantifiable, Alina added. We've run the algorithm on job postings and veteran applications. The negative correlation is significant. Third and most importantly, David Chen said, stepping forward, your disability claim. We subpoenaed through entirely legal channels, he assured, the internal notes from Perdition. The adjuster, Janet, noted a potential pre-existing condition based on no evidence. It was a standard delay tactic. Her performance bonus, according to her employment contract, was tied to her claim resolution speed and cost-saving outcomes. Denials and delays made her money. Alana looked at Marcus. This is the machine. It's not one evil mastermind. It's 10,000 people making rational, incentivized choices that add up to a moral catastrophe. So, we don't burn it down with a match. We burn it down with sunlight. She laid out the plan. Phase 1, the lawsuit. Michael Ross would file a wrongful denial case against the VA and Perdition Health Solutions, with Marcus as the lead plaintiff. But this wouldn't be a quiet, individual suit. It would be a class action, seeking to represent every black veteran in the region whose claim had been delayed or denied under similar pretexts in the past 5 years. They would attach the discriminatory data to the filing. Phase 2, the exposure. Apex's public relations arm, which usually launched tech products, would launch a campaign called Broken Promise. It would feature Marcus's story, the data, the names, not as a tear-jerking documentary, but as a forensic report. They would target the news desks, the congressional oversight committees, the social media feeds of the board members of Perdition. Phase 3, the bypass. While the legal and publicity war raged, Alana would use Apex's capital to create what the system should have been. She would hire Marcus and veterans like him into a new division, Apex Logistics Resilience. They would provide paid training, real salaries, and critically, immediate housing support through a corporate partnership, cutting the VA's years-long wait list out of the equation. It's a three-front war, Alana concluded. Legal, narrative, and practical. We fight it in the courts, in the media, and on the ground. You, Marcus, will be the face of all three. Are you still in? Marcus looked around the room at the screens mapping his tragedy, at the people ready to wage a war he didn't know could be fought. He thought of the cold bench, the weight of the blanket leaving his shoulders. He thought of all the other Marcuses, still out there in the dark. I'm in, he said, but on one condition. Alana raised an eyebrow. You don't just give me a job. You put me on the team that finds the others. I know how to spot them. I know what to look for." A genuine smile, the first he'd seen, touched Alana's lips. It was a smile of perfect, grim agreement. Done. The following Monday, the lawsuit landed like a bomb in the legal and media landscape. The headline was brutal. Decorated veteran sues VA, alleging systemic racial bias in benefits denial. It cited the Southern Poverty Law Center's ongoing litigation, embedding Marcus's story in a decades-long history. News vans crowded outside the courthouse. Perdition Health Solutions issued a bland statement about supporting veterans and respecting the legal process. Their stock price dipped 2%. Then, Alana Pierce went on a major financial news network. She was not interviewed as a billionaire philanthropist. She was interviewed as a CEO dissecting a catastrophic supply chain failure. With cool precision, she walked through the data, the incentive structures, the human cost. She ended by announcing the formation of Apex Logistics Resilience and its first hire, Sergeant Marcus Thorne. The internet erupted. The story had everything: a heroic veteran, a ruthless billionaire, a systemic scandal. But then, as the digital waves crested, a new piece of information surfaced, forwarded from a tip line Alana had set up. Alina brought it to her, her face pale. "It's about Arthur Branch," Alina said, "the Perdition VP. Our deep dive into his finances, we found a series of encrypted payments. They don't lead to a charity." "Where do they lead?" Alana asked. Alina took a breath. "To a shell corporation. And that corporation owns the building that houses the Illinois Regional Office of the Veterans Affairs, the office that awarded Perdition their contract. He's not just influencing the system, he's their landlord." The scope of the corruption just widened into an abyss. And before Alana could formulate the next move, her personal line buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number with a Washington, D.C. area code. She answered. A measured, authoritative voice on the other end said, "Ms. Pierce, this is Deputy Secretary Clayton Walsh, Department of Veterans Affairs. I think it's time we talked, before this gets any more out of hand." Alana Pierce held the phone, the Deputy Secretary's request hanging in the air like a threat disguised as an invitation. She looked at her team. "It seems we have their attention." She put the call on speaker. "Deputy Secretary, I'm listening." Clayton Walsh's voice was smooth, a practiced diplomat's tone. "Ms. Pierce, your advocacy has been noted. Passion is commendable, but lawsuits and media spectacles rarely serve the veterans they purport to help. They create adversarial stalemates. I'm proposing a dialogue, a private meeting, tomorrow, my office in D.C. David Chen, the lawyer, shook his head sharply, mouthing no. Alana's expression didn't change. "And the agenda for this dialogue?" "To discuss a potential settlement for Sergeant Thorne's individual case, and to explore a more constructive role for Apex within the veteran support ecosystem. The Secretary is impressed with your logistical proposals. We prefer partners to plaintiffs." He was offering a deal. Drop the class action, get Marcus his benefits, and get a seat at the table. It was a classic containment strategy. Isolate the leader, co-opt the innovator, and leave the system intact. "I'll consider it," Alana said, non-committal. "I'll have my office coordinate." She hung up. The room was tense. "He's trying to cut the head off the snake," Michael Ross said. "Settle with Marcus, give you a shiny advisory title, and bury the systemic allegations in a non-disclosure agreement." "Obviously," Alana replied, "which is why we don't refuse, we go and we record everything." She turned to Alina. "I want everything on Walsh, his career path, his political donors, any ties to Perdition or their subsidiaries. He didn't call out of concern for veterans. He called because we hit a nerve. Find out which one." The team worked through the night. By morning, Alina had a partial map. Clayton Walsh was a political operator, a former congressman who'd taken the VA post. His largest campaign donor had been a defense contractor. Not Perdition directly, but a contractor that shared a parent company with one of Perdition's major investors. It was a connection, but circumstantial. Alana and David Chen flew to Washington. The meeting was in a secure conference room, not Walsh's personal office. It was all stagecraft. Walsh entered with two aides, projecting an air of weary authority. "Ms. Pierce, thank you for coming. Let's speak frankly. The lawsuit is a distraction. It harms veterans' trust in the institution meant to serve them. We are prepared to expedite Sergeant Thorne's claim to a full and favorable resolution. We can also fast-track a pilot program for your Apex Resilience Initiative with federal matching funds." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It outlined the terms: a settlement for Marcus, a partnership for Apex, and a joint press conference announcing a new era of cooperation. The unstated term was clear: the class action disappears. The allegations of systemic bias are withdrawn. Alana didn't touch the paper. And the other 32,000 veterans experiencing homelessness, the 58% approval rate for black veterans in my region, the landlord, Arthur Branch. Walsh's smile tightened. Individual personnel matters are handled through proper channels. Broader statistical disparities are complex issues we're addressing through ongoing initiatives. This offer is a path to tangible, immediate good. I suggest you take it. It was then that Alana noticed one of Walsh's aides, a young man sitting silently in the corner, watching her with an unusual intensity. He wasn't taking notes. He was just observing. "Thank you for the offer, Deputy Secretary," Alana said, standing. "My counsel and I will review it. You'll have our response soon." Outside the building, David Chen exhaled. He's scared. That offer was too generous, too fast. He wants this buried. "He's not just scared," Alana said, her mind on the silent aide. "He's being watched by someone else." Back in Chicago, the media storm was escalating. Conservative outlets had picked up a new angle. Billionaire uses veteran as pawn in political stunt. Talking heads questioned Marcus's service, his character. A shadowy veterans advocacy group, the Patriot Service Foundation, released a statement calling Marcus ungrateful and Alana's actions a dangerous manipulation. Alina traced the Patriot Service Foundation. Its funding was a maze of shell companies, but one path led back to a public relations firm, a firm whose biggest client was Perdition Health Solutions. "The smear campaign is live," Alina announced. "They're going after Marcus's credibility and framing you as a radical exploiting his pain." Marcus saw the segments playing on the news in the Apex break room. His hands clenched. This was the other side of the spotlight, the invasion, the distortion. Alana found him there. "They're trying to make you feel alone," she said, "to make you doubt yourself. It's a tactic. We need to counter it not with more words but with proof." That proof arrived from an unexpected source. Leo, the mechanic on Western Avenue. He called the tip line, his voice shaking. "I saw the news about the sergeant. I need to talk. I didn't know. They told me it was a charity." Marcus and Michael Ross met him in a quiet coffee shop. Leo was a big man, now looking small and frightened. "A guy came around a few years back," he explained. "Said he was from a foundation helping vets. He set up a system. I'd do repairs for vets with pending claims, file a lien on their future back pay. He said it was to ensure I got paid, that it was helping them get service they couldn't afford. He handled all the paperwork. I just turned a wrench." "Who was he?" Michael asked. "His name was Derek Hull. He gave me business cards for the Veterans Assistance Network." Alina ran the name. Derek Hull was a former loan officer. His current employer, a subsidiary of Perdition Health Solutions that specialized in medical lien financing. It was a predatory loan operation disguised as charitable aid, trapping veterans in debt secured by their future disability benefits. Leo was a small, unwitting cog. Derek Hull was a salesman, and the machine was Perdition. "This is bigger than denied claims," Marcus said. a cold clarity settling over him. They're not just saying no at the front door, they're waiting at the back door to profit from the wreckage. The schematic of the machine was now complete. It had an intake filter, biased claims denial, a waste chute, homelessness, and a recycling plant, predatory lenders and employers feeding on the desperate. Every stage was monetized. Alana authorized the next phase. The Broken Promise campaign released its second wave, The Aftermath. It featured Leo's story with his identity protected, the documents linking Derek Hull to perdition, and a stark animation showing the financial flow from VA contracts to predatory subsidiaries. It asked one question: is this incompetence or is it business? The public reaction shifted. The smear campaign against Marcus now seemed hollow, defensive. The story was no longer about one veteran's hardship. It was about a coordinated financial exploitation scheme. Then the email arrived. It was sent to Alana's private, encrypted address. The subject line, R.E. Arthur Branch. The body contained no text, only 3 attachments. The first was a series of bank transfer records showing money flowing from the shell corporation that owned the VA building to an account in the Cayman Islands. The second was a log of keycard entries showing Arthur Branch accessing the VA office building after hours, dozens of times over 2 years. The third was a single, grainy photo of Branch in the building's secure server room, taken from a security camera. The sender's address was untraceable. The metadata was scrubbed. "It's a leak," Alina breathed. "From inside, someone is handing us Branch on a platter." "But who?" David Chen asked. "And why?" Alana studied the photo of Branch in the server room. He wasn't just the landlord. He had physical access to their data systems. This isn't just corruption. This is espionage. He could have been altering records, planting audit trails, anything. They had to move. Michael Ross filed an emergency motion with the court, adding allegations of potential criminal misconduct and demanding the preservation of all VA server data. It was a nuclear option, implying the department itself might be compromised. The day after the filing, Alana got another call, not from Walsh, from the silent aide who had been in the meeting. His name was Ben. "I can't talk long," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You're right, it's worse. Walsh isn't trying to protect the system. He's trying to protect Branch. They're connected. The money from the Shell Corporation, it doesn't stop in the Caymans. It gets donated, washed through PACs. Some of it helped Walsh's last congressional campaign. They're not just business associates. Walsh is indebted to him." Ben explained he was a data analyst in the VA's Office of the Inspector General. He'd been quietly tracking irregularities in the Chicago region for months, but had been stonewalled by his superiors. Seeing Alana's public fight gave him the courage to act. "Branch has friends everywhere," Ben warned. "He knows you have the photo. He'll panic." The warning came too late. That evening, as Marcus was leaving the Apex building, a black sedan pulled up alongside him. The window rolled down. Inside was Arthur Branch himself, his silver hair perfectly in place, his expression calm and friendly. "Sergeant Thorne," Branch said, his voice avuncular. "A moment of your time. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I'd like to discuss how we can make this right for you, personally." It was an offer and a threat delivered to the source. Marcus, alone on the sidewalk, looked at the man whose decisions had helped leave him on a bench in the cold. The man who owned the building, who accessed the servers, who had the deputy secretary in his pocket. The machine had just stepped out of the shadows and offered him a deal. And Marcus knew in that moment that this was no longer about his back pay or a job. It was about something much simpler and much harder. It was about which side of the car window he chose to be on. Marcus Thorne looked through the car window at Arthur Branch's polite, expectant smile. The air was cold, the same cold from the bus stop. This was the moment the machine offered him a way out, a personal exit from the war he'd started. He could take the deal, get his benefits, maybe a quiet consulting fee, save himself and leave the system and the other 32,000 exactly as it was. He thought of the blanket leaving his shoulders, the weight of it gone. The weight of doing nothing, of looking away, would be so much heavier. He leaned down slightly, meeting Branch's gaze. "I know what you did," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, carrying on the street. "I know about the server room. I know about the money. There is no right you can make for me that fixes that." Branch's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went flat and cold. "That's a dangerous accusation, Sergeant, from a man with precarious standing." "It's not an accusation," Marcus said, straightening up. "It's a fact, and it's already on its way to a federal judge. Have a good night, Mr. Branch." He turned and walked, not toward the Apex Tower, but toward the river, his back to the idling sedan. He didn't look back. He heard the window hum up and the car pulled silently away into traffic. The machine had made its offer. He had made his refusal. The battle lines were now absolute. The next 72 hours were a controlled detonation. Alana, with the evidence from the whistleblower Ben and Marcus's confirmation of Branch's direct approach, moved to endgame. She didn't go to the media. She went to the office of the Inspector General at the Department of Justice, with David Chen and Michael Ross at her side. They presented the complete package: the lawsuit data showing racial disparity, the financial links between Perdition and the predatory loan scheme, and the crown jewel, the security logs and photos placing Arthur Branch, a VA contractor, inside a secure federal server room after hours. This was no longer about bureaucratic failure. This was about potential felony, computer fraud, bribery, conspiracy. A federal judge, presented with the emergency motion, issued a sweeping order. He froze all assets of Arthur Branch and the implicated shell corporations. He ordered the immediate forensic imaging of the VA regional office servers, and he placed a temporary injunction on the VA's contract with Perdition Health Solutions, citing evidence of a conflict of interest so severe it called the entire procurement process into question. Perdition's stock plummeted 15% in a single day. Simultaneously, the Broken Promise campaign released its final devastating module, the hostile takeover. It laid out in clear, animated flowcharts the full architecture of the machine, from the biased denials to the homelessness to the predatory lending, all leading back to the profits of a single corporation and its compromised landlord. It ended with the photo of Branch in the server room and a single question: who does the VA really serve? The public and political reaction was instantaneous and furious. Bipartisan calls for hearings echoed from Capitol Hill. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs, facing a scandal that could end his tenure, announced the immediate suspension of Deputy Secretary Clayton Walsh pending a full investigation into his ties to Branch. Walsh resigned before the end of the week. The VA, under intense scrutiny, did something unprecedented. It settled the class action lawsuit, not quietly but publicly. It agreed to a full, independent audit of all disability claims denied in the region over the past 5 years, with a special focus on racial disparities. It agreed to reform its contractor oversight and to dismantle the cozy real estate deals that had compromised its independence. And it approved every single claim in Marcus Thorne's class. Over 2,000 veterans would finally get their benefits, their back pay, and an apology. For Marcus, the personal resolution came in a plain envelope from the VA. His full disability rating approved, 18 months of back pay, a formal letter of apology. The money was life-changing. The apology was nothing. The victory was the audit, the reform, the 2,000 other faces he would never see but had helped. He didn't leave Apex. He took his position as lead outreach coordinator for Apex Logistics Resilience seriously. Using his back pay, he did something Alana didn't expect. He bought a building, not a skyscraper, a modest 6-unit apartment building in a neighborhood near the L train. He offered the units at cost to veterans coming out of Apex's training program, creating a stable landing pad that didn't depend on the broken voucher system. He became a landlord, but of a different kind. The Justice Department's investigation led to indictments. Arthur Branch was charged with conspiracy, bribery, and unauthorized access to a government computer system. The executives at Perdition Health Solutions faced charges of fraud and racketeering. The story made the front page, but for Marcus and Alana, the real headline was quieter. The machine's most malicious gears had been removed. One evening, months later, Alana asked Marcus to meet her at the Michigan Avenue bus stop. It was autumn again, a crisp night. The city lights glittered. She handed him a small, wrapped box, a late housewarming gift. Inside was a simple, framed document. It was the original schematic Alina had created on the data wall that first day, the map of the machine with all its choke points and profit centers. Across the bottom, Alana had written, "For the man who showed us where to cut." Marcus held it, a slow smile spreading across his face. It looked smaller on paper. "It does," Alana agreed. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the bench. "I owe you a debt, Marcus. You gave me a target for my rage, but you also," she paused, searching for the words. "You showed me it could be more than rage. It could be a rebuild." Marcus nodded. "You kept your promise. You didn't give me charity. You gave me a job, and then you gave me my war back." He looked at her. "But this started before me, with your brother." Alana's breath misted in the air. She had never spoken about Liam to him, not in detail. Now she did. She told him about the funny, protective big brother who came home closed off, the VA therapy that was always 6 weeks booked out, the night he didn't answer his phone. "I thought if I could just break the system that failed him, I could fix something," she said, her voice tight. "But you can't fix the past. You showed me that. You can only build something new in its place, and you have to let the people you're building it for lead the way." That was the final, surprising pivot. Alana Pierce, the billionaire disruptor, had learned to follow. She had provided the resources, the leverage, the platform. But Marcus and the veterans they now served were charting the path. The Apex Foundation, initially a corporate social responsibility line item, was spun off into an independent nonprofit. They named it the Liam Pierce Center for Veteran Integration. Its board was chaired by a former sergeant turned outreach coordinator, Marcus Thorne. Its mission was direct, bypassing the broken pipelines, immediate housing, skills-matched employment, and legal advocacy, all under one roof. It was the anti-machine. The model worked. Within a year, they had helped transition over 300 veterans from homelessness or crisis into stable careers and housing. Their success rate became a scalding contrast to the VA's own struggling programs, creating a new kind of pressure, the pressure of demonstrated possibility. Marcus never moved into a penthouse. He lived in one of the units in his building. He was on a first-name basis with his neighbors. He knew who was struggling, who was celebrating, who needed an extra hand moving a couch. He had a home, not just a house. He had a mission, not just a job. He had a family, not just colleagues. Alana changed too. The cold, furious executive who had approached him on the bench softened at the edges. She started spending one afternoon a week at the Liam Pierce Center, not in meetings, but in the communal kitchen, drinking coffee and listening to veteran stories. She found she was good at listening. Her brother's photo sat on her desk, not as a ghost of a wound, but as a reminder of the work. The system wasn't fixed. Nationwide, 32,000 veterans were still homeless. Discrimination in benefits was still a live lawsuit. But in one city, a circuit had been cut and rewired. A proof of concept existed. It proved that the crisis wasn't inevitable. It was the result of specific, breakable choices. The story that began with a blanket offered in the cold ended with a foundation being laid in the light. It was a story about two kinds of service: the service sworn to a country and the service sworn to a person in need, and about how the second can redeem the failures of the first. It proved that the most powerful force isn't charity or even justice, but repair. The deliberate, meticulous work of rebuilding what was broken, with the broken pieces themselves leading the reconstruction. As the first snow of the new winter began to fall on Chicago, Marcus Thorne stood at the window of the center, looking out at the city. He wasn't looking for a warm bench. He was checking the weather, thinking about the new cohort starting in the morning, and whether the heat in the old building on Western was holding. He was home. And for the first time in a long time, the man who had once given his only blanket away felt, finally, warm. Warmth. It is the first and most fundamental promise we make to each other as human beings. Shelter from the cold. For Marcus Thorne, that promise was broken by the very nation he swore to defend. His country left him in the cold. And yet, on a freezing night, his first instinct was not to hoard what little warmth he had, but to give it away to a shivering child. That single, instinctive act of kindness was not a solution. It was a spark. It lit the fuse on a truth too long buried in spreadsheets and waiting rooms, that systems don't fail by accident. They are designed, they are maintained, and they can be dismantled. Marcus and Alana's story is a blueprint. It shows that the gap between a veteran sleeping on a bench and a veteran building a new life isn't a matter of charity or individual grit. It's a matter of targeted, intelligent pressure applied to the exact points where the system is designed to break people. It's about seeing the machine, understanding its gears, and having the courage and the resources to jam them. But here is the quiet, lingering question their story leaves us with. Where are the other sparks? The Marcus Thornes of the world are not rare. They are one of more than 32,000. They are in every city, on every cold bench, their potential and their pain invisible to a world that has learned to look away. Alana Pierce had the resources of a billion-dollar corporation to amplify that spark. What do the rest of us have? We have our attention. We have our voice. We have the choice every day to see or to look away. The real scandal isn't just the corruption in a distant office. It's the collective shrug that allows it to continue. Change does not begin with a billionaire's intervention. It begins with a citizen's refusal to accept that this is just how things are. The blanket passed from a veteran to a child was a signal, a message in the cold. It said, "I see you. Your comfort matters more than my own." That is the core ethic of service, and it is the exact opposite of the ethic that builds machines of neglect and profit. Our choice as a society is which ethic we will empower. If this story moved you, if it angered you, if it made you think of someone in your own life who has been failed by a system that was supposed to help, then you have felt the spark. Don't let it go out. Subscribe to this channel. We are dedicated to sharing stories that don't just pull at your heartstrings, but that show you where the strings are attached, stories of hidden systems, quiet courage, and the tangible ways the world can be remade. Tap the like button. It tells the algorithm that stories with substance, stories that challenge and inspire, deserve to be seen. Share this video with one person who needs to see it today. Share it with a friend who feels powerless against big problems. Share it with a veteran you know to show them they are not forgotten. Share it to add your voice to a chorus that demands better. And most importantly, tell us in the comments, what is one system you encounter in your daily life that feels designed to exhaust you? Where do you see a spark of kindness that could be fanned into a flame of change? Your story matters. Your perspective is the next piece of the puzzle. This is how we build a world where no one who served is left in the cold. Not by waiting for a hero, but by becoming a citizen who pays attention. By choosing to see and then choosing to act. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for caring. May your life be filled with purpose, your heart with courage, and your hands with the will to build what is broken. Goodbye.